Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And guys, do we have any baseball news to even talk about this week? Feels like it's kind of slow. We were going to talk minor leagues, but should we?
Hey, Robinson Chirinos is news, Tyler.
Well, how did Robinson Chirinos news happen, Jesse? You've completely ruined.
He was going for the lockout ended.
Wow.
And you were not on the same page.
Okay, let's just start.
We didn't
that
talk
over.
about it.
Okay.
Jesse doesn't like to keep flubs in ever. He's like, just start it over. Said a word wrong. We have to restart.
I say we keep all of this in, but Tyler just says, "Welcome to the Warehouse Pod again."
Yeah, we could do that. Would you be okay with that, Jesse?
Do it right now.
Whatever.
Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And we do not understand sarcasm on this podcast. So let's just get into the obvious. Baseball is back. It's hot. The lockout is over. And how are we feeling, boys? Eli?
I feel pretty good. Yeah, it's definitely been entertaining. One of the teams that I enjoy paying attention to, unfortunately not the one this podcast is about, but one of the teams I like has been making some moves, and that's been pretty cool. I've been watching the Mariners acquire some talent and take advantage of some teams continuing to tank despite this new revamped CBA.
Yes, that is true. We were back earlier than you both had. I think you both said 2 months. We were going to miss 2 months. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I said May. The agreement.
Okay, so
yeah.
okay,
I was off a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was literally days after Jesse and I were like, "Oh yeah, it'll probably happen in May." Nobody seems like they're pushing that hard, and then 3 days later, we got a deal.
It's collusion. So, they just wanted to make the Warehouse Podcast look bad. They were waiting.
Yeah, right.
The Warehouse Pod just is in tune with the ebbs and flows of baseball is what you need to take away from this.
Exactly.
They're like, they predict everything right. We need to throw them off. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they had to strike at our legitimacy. That's how they call us fake news.
Exactly.
All right. Well, yeah, the lockout is over, which is awesome. And what we kind of wanted, because I know we did say at the end of last week we were going to talk minor leagues this week, but I think that was with the anticipation that there would still be a lockout this week or next episode. But we're going to push that to a subsequent episode. So that will still come. But this week's going to be lockout focused and then some Orioles specific free agency moves that have happened so far. So let's talk lockout first. The CBA was agreed to. It does expand playoffs to 12 teams total. We are going to play all 162 games, which is hilarious because the league canceled games and they said they can't make them up. And it was this arbitrary deadline that got pushed back 4 or 5 different times. But now, actually, we're kidding. We are going to play 162.
It means that every deadline they put forth was just absolute. That was the real fake news. They're trying to characterize us as fake news, but we see the truth. That was the fake news, those deadlines.
Yeah, exactly. It was, and that was even the deadline that when they did agree to it, it was the day before, and it got pushed the next day, and then it was like, oh, we need the it agreed to by 3 p.m. But then it wasn't until dinner time, and it's like, what are we doing? But they're going to play all 162. The season is going to be extended by a few days, and they're going to mix in a couple double headers throughout the season. So that's fine. It's cool. We want all 162, and now the players are going to get all the money that they've signed in their contracts, which is awesome.
The thing I'll say about that real quick is that, it is kind of funny, and it just shows kind of how preposterous it exposes the league in many ways, right? And kind of what their antics have been. But all these artificial deadlines they've created and then reneged on have perfectly been utilized to intimidate the players and to scare them. Okay, we're canceling games. Okay, players, that's your first paycheck. That's out the window, right? You're not getting that because our position is you're not getting paid for games you don't play in. So, every step of the way, the league has kind of used and that's how the entire lockout started to begin with. The league did the lockout, right, to intimidate the players and scaring them into jeopardizing their overall well-being, their financial stability, et cetera, their financial well-being, right? And by trying to intimidate them into caving into the proposals and the offers that the league was giving. So the deadlines and the announcing of the cancellation of games was just, one more tactic used by the MLB to try to reach a deal quicker that was favorable to them.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting. We kind of saw it come out in the media a little bit that the owners, I think they were kind of trying to break the union through the things you're saying here, Jesse, about like taking away paychecks, and clearly that pits the higher paid players against the lower paid players immediately within the union. Talking about taking away games, but then it sounds like the owners, I guess they thought they were going to get the good pub in the media for the week between canceling games and when the CBA was agreed to, but it kind of was the opposite. And they were getting upset. There were tons of reports that like the owners didn't like how they were being portrayed and they were the enemy in all this. Jeff Passan was emailing players saying, do not take this deal. Like just insanity that I think the owners had the whole entire situation misconstrued in their head. Now we will talk about this. The owners still come out on top in this deal, but they come out a little bit less on top than they had, in the previous offers that were made. But let's talk CBT, the CBT, which is the competitive balance tax, was up to $230 million in 2022. I think it was previously $220 million was the last owner offer, and they wanted to be flat for several years after that. Actually, it will go up every single year, maxing out at $244 million in 2026. The minimum player salaries increased to $710,000. I think that's where the offer had been at for a while. They didn't come up to the players wanted $710,000 in 2022. It doesn't quite get there, but it does rise up to $780,000 by 2026.
Tyler, just real quick, one little clarification.
Yeah,
minimum salary is $700,000. The players wanted $710,000.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
You misspoke a little bit.
Yeah, but it's going up from a season ago, which is awesome. These players that get just a cup of coffee or two will get paid significantly better, so that's awesome. And then there's going to be a $50 million pre-arbitration bonus pool. So that's kind of the money stuff. So I feel like we should kind of like pause there and maybe debrief a little bit. So how do we think like current major league players have kind of made out with that deal, considering the goalposts are always moving here. It was never going to be everything the players wanted. It's never going to match with inflation and with revenues and all that stuff, because that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. But Eli, how do you feel the players made out from a monetary point of view here?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to say is what the players did is they kind of, at a fundamental level, every single one of these CBA agreements and negotiations and, every time we go through this cycle every 5 years, you're setting a precedent for the next set of talks. And I think that the players definitely, came out much stronger than they had in previous negotiations. I think that they kind of laid the groundwork for very, very legitimate improvements and made some legitimate improvements. I think that the pre-arb bonus pool is something that I look at. It created an entirely new separate source of player salary, player revenue that had not existed previously. And that's something you can build on and expand on in future negotiations. There was, the minimum salary increase to $700,000 is pretty significant. Like we talked about last episode, if you put it in the context of the 4 major sports leagues in America, I think this is still the second lowest. That said, it is a pretty substantial increase from where we were before. And I think that's kind of the sentiment that rings true everywhere you look. It's not as good as it could be. It's not necessarily totally even, but there were pretty substantial improvements made across the board. And I think the players did a good job of drawing a pretty hard line and pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people are talking about the pre-arbitration bonus pool as like the biggest win, because just the fact that it exists now is huge. Because you would imagine, this could always change, you would imagine it's just going to increase in future CBAs. That's, right. I think I saw somebody on Twitter compare the pre-arbitration bonus getting in here to when the owners first got the CBT implemented years ago. Like the owners have wanted a cap for a long time. They haven't gotten a cap, but they got this CBT implemented, which basically serves that way. The players have wanted for a while to get younger players paid earlier in their careers, and this will go a long way, a significant way to getting that done. So I agree. I think that's huge. Jesse, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah. So I think Eli's right that there is, some good stuff that can be built on here, right? The minimum salary, I think, is also a big thing. I mean, it was just the fact that we were even talking about 700,000 was just a giant increase from, I think, what the 550,000 minimum salary that was existing before.
Yep.
But I think that is just massive. And, the fact that the goalpost, right, even started there, right? Because the owners were offering 700,000, I think, or the league was offering 700,000, right? I think there are some good things, and there are some reasons that Eli already pointed out to be kind of to be somewhat excited for the players about this. And I will say, I was a little disappointed with how everything worked out. And, I definitely don't want to sound like I'm blaming the players, because they're in a very, very difficult situation. And, they are ultimately the ones being exploited by the league and the owners, right? So I definitely don't want to sound like I'm blaming them. But I was kind of, and partly in my, I was kind of thinking that they were more prepared kind of to actually go through large amounts of the season without playing games. And maybe they were, and they were just satisfied with this deal. But it kind of feels a little bit to me, the league announced they were canceling games, and I wonder how much fear started how much fear kind of creeped in for the players, that made them feel more like, hey, we really need to try to come to an arrangement and come to a deal. I don't know about that. The thing I'm also looking at is like the executive subcommittee voting entirely against the deal. And, Eli was talking to me a while ago about some rationales for that. Maybe you want to get into. But the fact that they voted unanimously against it, that also makes me, if they're not satisfied with the deal, right, that makes me kind of feel like I can't be ecstatic about it for the players if the executive subcommittee was not for it, right? So, so I again, I definitely think there were some good things here. I commend the players for the efforts that they did make, right? They did seem to be unified. They did seem to be organized to some extent. And I'm sure so much of what happened in the deal would not have happened had they not been so disciplined and organized to the extent that they were. So, I commend the players a lot for, their quote unquote victories. But, of course, I always want things to go in the direction of the players, right? I always want them to be the ones, profiting the most, right? Honestly, from Major League Baseball, right? And the fact that they aren't, and the fact that everything is still so rigged against, workers just more generally in this country, but in this specific case, the baseball players, right? That stays with me, right? And that still frustrates me and angers me to an extent. So yeah,
I think your point about the difference in the voting blocks is interesting, because the executive subcommittee of the Players Association voted unanimously against it, but then I think it was like 20 some of the teams voted in favor of the CBA, and it's a combination of the team's votes and the subcommittee together to determine whether they're going to accept it or not. So, Eli, do you want to kind of speak on that?
Yeah, real quick. It was 26 of the 30 teams actually voted for it. So the final count, there are 8 players on the executive subcommittee it was 26-4 of player reps, and then 8 of the executive subcommittee. So it was 26-12 in the end. But yeah, I read an interview in The Athletic that Garrett Cole did, and he, being on the executive subcommittee, was able to shed a little bit of context. He wouldn't say exactly what their opposition was to, but he did say that the executive subcommittee, in a show of unity, decided that they were always going to vote unanimously together and throw their weight one direction or another as a unit. So whether all 8 of them really were against the deal or whether they weren't, all we can say is that we aren't totally sure about that. But in the show of unity, all 8 of them voted against it. That said, the subcommittee as a whole, at least a majority of them were against it. And so I think what that says is definitely, if you hold out, you will always bring the owners a little bit closer to your side. That is what it is. They want you on the field as much as you want to be on the field. So it definitely, it seems like there was probably some more to be gained from these talks. It seems like the players thought that they had a little bit more leverage to leverage. I don't know, a little bit more sway that they could have over these negotiations if they held out a little bit longer. But that said, clearly folks wanted to get on the field, and this deal, as we said, has some marked improvements. As for topics that they could actually, have been upset about not having in there, the time to free agency was not changed at all. An average or a player still has to be in the league 6+ years. The time to arbitration was not changed at all. And, this was stuff that the MLB considered non-starters. There was also, there were like no alterations to revenue sharing, so the teams that, aren't the Yankees and the Dodgers can still cry poor, essentially. And all of these things were, taken off the table pretty early. So yeah, we shouldn't say that this is a total unequivocal win for the players. The owners are definitely still in a good position here and will still profit plenty. But yeah, moderate wins.
Yeah, and they did add an additional tax bracket of the CBT. The first one starts at that $230 million that we mentioned. Second is 250, third is 270, and then the fourth is the Steve Cohen bracket, which is the $290 million, which Cohen is, the Mets owner, is wearing that as a badge of honor. And he already has said he expects to kind of cruise past that. Cohen is, I think, by far the richest MLB owner. I think that's not even a contest. So, that makes sense. And he's spent a ton this offseason, which is good. I mean, that's fun. That's what you should do. If you're a billionaire and you buy a baseball team, spend money on the baseball team.
Yeah, it's great for the Mets because, Mets fans look around, they're like, wow, we've got this owner and he's just willing to spend. So it's like, all right, great. Let's go get, a Max Scherzer and let's pay him $43 million a year, and yeah, you're just going to get the best players.
Yeah. I mean, that rotation has Scherzer, DeGrom, and Chris Bassett. They just got Bassett from the A's.
That's right.
It's just I think Taijuan Walker's their 4, and he was an all-star last year. So
he's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. Had a bad second half, but yeah.
I was kind of thinking, I mean, it's so great, so much of the time fans are like, oh, he's not worth this amount of money. The Orioles shouldn't sign him, or, whatever team, X team shouldn't sign him or whatever. But yeah, when you're in the position, the owner is willing to spend whatever when there's no budget for any of these guys, then, I mean, what difference does it make? Yeah, go spend whatever on whatever guy. Doesn't matter.
It's not my money. It's not my money.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So.
Okay. A couple other things, non-money. Well, it's all going to come down to money, but it's not technically tied right to these rules. Universal DH is now implemented, which is cool. Which Nelson Cruz signed with the Nationals this weekend. That was weird, but
probably wouldn't have happened without the rule change.
No.
Right.
So that's back, which is good. Players can now only be optioned 5 times within a single season, which is good. So, it's still a lot, but it gives a little bit more stability to a person's life. So that's a small improvement. Players that finish first or second in Rookie of the Year voting will accrue a full year of service time, regardless of when in the year they were called up. So that, being Orioles fans with Adley Rutschman kind of in the wings is interesting. I also think that if they added something about if the player is up on opening day, a team can potentially gain draft picks in the upcoming draft or in the next draft based on performance by the player. So again, sort of an incentive to encourage teams to promote players earlier. So that's interesting. And then, well, let's talk about that first, because then this last point is kind of what was holding stuff up at the end, which is the international draft. So let's stop for a second, talk about the Rookie of the Year stuff, the years of service time, because that was what we were told for a while was something they wanted to combat, was service time manipulation and battling tanking kind of at the same time. And I skipped right over. I'm sorry. There's a draft lottery too. This plays into it as well. The first 6 picks of the MLB draft starting next year. So the Orioles still get the number 1 pick without a doubt this year. Starting next. Yeah. big win for Mike Elias.
Let's go.
So starting next year, the first 6 picks of the MLB draft will be a lottery style, where the teams will have the worse they finish, they'll have better odds of getting the first overall pick. And a team can pick in the top 6 twice in a row. And then after that, they fall to 10th. So you can't, with this deal, do what the Orioles just did, where they've picked in the top 5, like 4 seasons in a row. That won't be possible anymore. So that was the other big thing to fix, quote unquote, tanking. So Eli, I know you have some strong thoughts here about if this is done enough to combat tanking. So would you care to share those?
Yeah. I mean, very simply, we come out of the lockout and you see the Athletics trade away Matt Olson and Chris Bassett. You see the Reds trade away Sonny Gray, trade away Jesse Winker, trade away Eugenio Suarez. And, it's very, very, very apparent that this did little to nothing to address tanking. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be in the top 6 picks, regardless, if you're anywhere in the bottom 6 teams in the league and you're locked in to get one of those top 6 picks, and because it's still an odds system for the lottery, you're probably still going to get, the number 1 pick, the number 2 pick, the number 3 pick in order, then yeah, I mean, it's really not going to do that much to hurt, the concept of tanking as a way to improve the team. Falling to 10th is a little bit more significant, but there's only 1 or 2 teams at a time that are really in a multi-year rebuild. The Orioles have obviously committed to the rebuild as hard as any team has in the history of the game. We are following that Astros model from 10 years ago. So clearly the Orioles are an exception, but a team being in the bottom 6 in the league, for more than like 4 years in a row is pretty unusual. Usually you will start to see some measure of improvement within a couple years. And so I think that, after like in that 3rd season, you falling to the 10th pick, that is a little bit of a deterrent to go into these super, super extended ones, but you can still get 2 number 1 draft picks in a row, probably, if you commit hard to it. So, I'm not sure how much this really did to address tanking. Obviously, the lottery is a deterrent. There will be 1 or 2 teams that fall out of order every single year. But, like the Orioles took Heston Kjerstad with that number 2 pick because he's still a phenomenal talent, right? And he's going to come in, and myocarditis aside, he's a phenomenal draft prospect. He's still pretty much anyone in the top 10 most years is probably going to be a major leaguer someday, has a huge, like ridiculously high upside. And so is a team going to be upset about having the number 3 pick instead of the number 1, the number 6 pick instead of the number 4? No, they're really not.
Yeah. And what I would add to that is just, it's sort of the nature of MLB draft compared to other leagues drafts is that it's a little bit more of a crapshoot at the top. And I would say like a lot of times the teams are kind of after like those signing bonus pools almost more than the individual players, not necessarily, but like, that's what they did with Kerstad. That's kind of what they did with Kauser to a degree. So yeah, I think the response to this as a way to combat tanking has definitely been a little bit mixed. Jess, what's your read on the situation?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like what Eli said, I think it does very, very little. As an overall strategy, right, I don't see how it does any of what's really happened. Serves as like a really, really strong deterrent, right? They're not massive financial penalties, for instance, for finishing in the bottom of the league, like X number of years in a row or whatever, right? So because there's nothing really like that, I think there's always going to be this sort of incentive to, right, even if you're not the absolute worst team, right, there is still, okay, we're the 8th worst team, let's just kind of not spend any money, wherever you draw the cutoff, right, the people kind of, or the teams right above the cutoff, you could say are going to try to tank to get below the cutoff, right? So I think that it would kind of like it would kind of, in order to really like combat tanking, there really needs to kind of be probably a new system that kind of gets created in order to address it entirely, because there is just too much you have to basically explain to owners and have a good reason for owners why they need to go spend that money and go sign that free agent pitcher that you don't want to give $10 million to, right? And there isn't really anything like that has been addressed, so
yeah. They're gonna have to do something to make it not profitable to lose. That that gets into like the revenue sharing and all that stuff, where the A's still get the revenue sharing even if they put an awful team on the field and are clearly making a play to move to Las Vegas or get a new stadium, which Oakland has told them is not happening. So it's like, I mean, the Reds is a little bit, I don't know. The Reds are just, I think the Reds have the ownership group that like cries poor the most. I think they might be the least valuable ownership group. So it's a little bit legitimate.
They actually are. Yeah.
But it's still, then don't buy a baseball team. Don't buy a baseball team if that's what you're going to do.
But, and also, I mean, I guess the larger point is literally like 2-3 seasons ago, they were like, you know what, we're going for it. Mike Moustakas, come here. Nick Castellanos, come here. And they start signing these people. They signed Eugenio Suarez to an extension. Yeah. And so they start signing people, and it's like, clearly they had the money.
Right.
And then they only won like 87 games in their first year after that. And they're like, you know what? That was disappointing. Let's take it all back. We're going to go get more profit.
Yeah, I think the Reds were like a fine team last year. They were probably pretty close to the playoffs. I think they were like an 80-some win team, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, you like look at that division.
It sucks, yeah.
Like what's the competition? The Brewers have done like next to nothing to upgrade their offense. They're still going to have great pitching. You got the Cubs, who like signed Marcus Stroman, but they let Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo, and Chris Bryant walk away. And
Cardinals,
they're trying to trade away Wilson Contreras. Yeah, the Cardinals will be a solid team, but they haven't exactly gone and gotten any impact bats or anything like that. It's just very like that division is always wide open. And the Reds absolutely had the ability with Luis Castillo, Tyler Mahle, Sonny Gray, like with those guys leading your rotation, and Castellanos, if they had brought him back, Moustakas, Winker.
Votto.
Yeah, Votto. I mean, it's like you've got plenty of talent to go and make a run at this division. And it's like an active decision to say, no, we're not going to do that. And we're going to take the extra revenue that we would have lost for player salary.
Yeah. I now want them to trade Joey Votto. Like,
absolutely. You got to feel terrible for the dude.
I'm sure Joey Votto wants the Reds to trade Joey Votto.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know. He is an infallibly loyal guy. To his credit, but
he's been there for a long time. Yeah,
I don't know.
He's a Hall of Famer.
He totally revamped his swing last year too. He hit like 11, 12 bombs in a month, and then you look at it and it's like, Well, you've got this like another superstar player at the heart of the lineup, and you're willing to just let him fade off into the sunset.
Yeah, I think there was a tweet today saying like Ken Griffey Jr. is one of the 10 highest paid players on the Reds this year.
That's right. Ken Griffey Jr. is the 6th highest player. He's going to make like $3 million. There aren't 6 people making $3 million on the Reds this year.
Incredible.
It is incredible. It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So that's the thing is they didn't address it. It's you can still make a lot of money without being competitive, or even, not every team can be competitive every year. That's fine. That's part of the sport, but you should be making an effort to be competitive. Or like, the NFL, it's like usually a team is down 1 year. Like it's acceptable to be down 1 year and then you pop back up. Like that's kind of what it should be. 1 year, maybe 2 years. That's it. You need to get back up to be like a top half team. And that has not been addressed here. And I don't know when that, or if that ever will be addressed, to be honest. Well, let's talk about the draft, or I'm sorry, not the draft, the service time manipulation stuff, because this does directly impact the Orioles with Adley Rutschman, who, look, clearly he's the best catcher in the Orioles organization. He's probably one of the 10 best catchers in all of professional baseball right now. And yet the Orioles have likely Jacob Nottingham going to be on the roster and Robinson Chirinos, who we'll talk about in a second. But they've addressed the players' needs or concerns by giving you a full year of service time if you finish first or second in Rookie of the Year, which is a ridiculous bar to clear to get that full year of service time.
Absolutely.
But
Adley's gonna do it.
He might.
Right. Adley's
might.
gonna do it. Yeah.
Didn't who's it for the Rays last year? Did it? And he played like only half the season.
Wander Franco.
Yeah.
No, Wander Franco.
Oh.
So that's the type of player. But and what they're giving the teams to encourage them to promote these players is a couple of draft picks if the player starts on opening day on the roster. Now, to me, that's not a huge incentive for a player the quality of Adley Rutschman, who you think is a franchise-altering player. Would I like to have a random second-round draft pick, or do I want an extra year of a Hall of Fame catcher in my mind? Would I rather have an extra season of a Hall of Fame catcher in his prime? To me, that's a pretty easy decision for Mike Elias to make. So
and it's also beyond that, a Hall of Fame catcher in his prime below market value.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's no comparison.
So I think that maybe makes sense for lower tier players. Maybe that makes sense for a DL Hall, who I think is still really talented, obviously, but he's volatile. He gets hurt. We'll call him up to get the draft pick. And then maybe he blows up, whatever, but we get the draft pick. Maybe it works for that type of a player, but I don't think it works for a Chris Bryant type, which is the whole reason this is a thing. It doesn't work for that type of a player. So I think it's literally throwing the players scraps for what the whole issue was.
Yeah, this is a total non-factor. Just like it, I no part of me thinks that teams are going to alter the way they work as a result of this being implemented in the CBA. It's really even if Adley Rutschman does become one of the 10 best catchers in the league, and he is that from the time that he steps in, he might not be Rookie of the Year.
Right.
It's as simple as that. First or second in Rookie of the Year is a just ridiculously high bar, and there's no way to expect that of somebody. Vlad Guerrero came up, had the first 80 grade hit tool ever given out by MLB Pipeline. And he really took until his second, third year to become the guy that he is now. So there really is absolutely no guarantees that somebody would get that. And you're not going to make a decision assuming that somebody is not going to struggle upon promotion to Major League Baseball.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to chase draft picks. Nobody's got that confidence in a prospect.
Yeah, especially we just talked about the volatility at the very top of the draft, let alone a competitive balance pick at the end of the first or the end of the second round.
Right.
That's just even less so. Jess, do you have anything to add?
It's obviously not enough. Of course, the owners didn't want it to be enough, right? I do think there will be, because of how this is set up, there will be a little less service time manipulation overall. I do think that will happen, but it doesn't eradicate the problem entirely.
Why do you think there'll be less? Just because this is like a minor incentive that in some cases will
yeah,
help?
right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. Like, this is the thing, like, it's tough to say, like, right now, how we can say this. I think you can say if the CBA is good or bad, but I don't think you can say to what extent it is, because we need to see what holes the owners are going to poke in the CBA, because they always will. And I think this is one that we can see it play out for the next couple of years and then assess if it was literally ineffective or did nothing, or what the outcome was. So we might have to wait on it, but if it helps a couple players get up sooner, that's good, but it's likely that more needs to be done here.
Oh, I mean, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Last thing to talk about with the lockout and the new CBA is the potential for an international draft. This is apparently the issue that at the last minute was holding everything up. The owners wanted it implemented right away. The players said they need time. David Ortiz got involved at some point. He sent a voice memo to a large group of players. There was all this drama. As it currently stands, the way international signings go, it's kind of the wild, wild west a little bit. And it's also hilarious that the Orioles just got serious about this, and now there's going to be a draft to eliminate all of it. But how it is now is like teams agree with players when they're like 13 years old sometimes, and then it doesn't become public until they're legally allowed to be signed when they're like 16 years old. That's not a good process, but that's kind of what happens right now, which is why Mike Elias has been here for 3 years now and is just now starting to sign significant international prospects. But basically the league wants to do away with that, and they want to do an international draft, which is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of these rogue signings, you would have a draft and players would get picked in that order, similar to how the amateur draft works now with players in college and high school, and then Puerto Rico is included in the current amateur draft. So how they settled things right now is there's not currently set to be an international draft yet. However, there's a deadline of July 25th of this year for the players to agree to a setup of an international draft to take place for the first time in 2024. I believe if they do not agree to that by July 25th, we could be back in for a whole nother round of CBA negotiations after this season. So that sounds like a nightmare. So to me, it sounds like the players are basically backed into a corner. Like, you've got to figure it out in the next 4 months or else there's going to be a problem. I don't know. This is definitely one of the items that I need to learn a little bit more about because it's so new, but did either of you guys have any sort of like takes here about draft being good or bad or anything in between?
Yeah. So one really interesting note here, the thing that I can say with confidence is that the current system in Latin America is absolutely broken. It's horribly corrupt, and players are exploited very, very regularly. That said, I think another angle that's being talked about less of this is the Seiya Suzuki's, the Ichiro's, the Shohei Ohtani's, the Kwang Hyun Kim's, like all of these Eastern Asian players coming over. Their current system, where there is a posting fee that's contingent on the amount of money they get in their contract, all of this stuff, putting them into an international draft is going to horribly, horribly limit their markets. I mean, assuming it's going to end up like this and the number one pick will be worth, like an $8 million bonus that, Adley got, probably with a little bit less because there's some uncertainty in scouting, et cetera, et cetera. Assuming the draft is structured a similar way, you tell a player that is making millions of dollars, playing in the Nippon League or, playing in the Korean League, whatever. You tell them that you can come, you can get a couple $1 million signing bonus, but then you're probably on like an $80,000 salary in the minor leagues for a year or two. I think we're going to see a much, much like smaller influx of players from that portion of the world. And I think that it makes, I don't know, what it does is it would also give owners 6 years of control over Shohei Ohtani rather than the 2-year deal they signed him to. And these are fully fledged players by the time they come over. I think Ichiro was like 26, 27 by the time he came over. So you get him then through his age 32, 33 season. I think Shohei's 28 now. You'd have him through his age 34 season or whatever it is. Or I guess 32 season. It establishes a level of control over these people that really starts after they've already become free agents, after they've already gone through that system. I think in the NPB, you have to be on a team for like 7 years before you can be posted. And so that's all in all like 13 years where you've like, you don't get to choose. Basically. Yeah, you don't get to choose what team you play for. And, even beyond that, you are getting like, I don't know how their economics work, but at least below market value here as a fully fledged free agent, who's put in this service time to get to the point where they could be posted in the US and for the MLB.
Yeah, they'll have to come up with some sort of exemption for those types of players, because typically the Asian players are already older when they come over. They're like 25, 26. So there's going to have to be something there. Jess, you want to hop in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, don't get me wrong. If the owners want it, right, that's a big red flag, right? So there's a reason they want this system, and it can't be good, right? It just can't be good. With that said, kind of like we were talking, Eli kind of mentioned at the very beginning of his explanation, is that I do think, hopefully, if things go well, it should do something to curb the sort of predatory behavior, right, that teams have towards these young kids and stuff like that. So that I see that as like the one big positive that could come out of this, right? But right, I think there are going to be a lot of trade-offs for that one positive, right?
Yeah, I guess the other thing there is that the Orioles are building up this big facility in the Dominican Republic. That probably doesn't need to happen if you can just say, yeah, that guy's on my team. That guy's on my team. The draft kind of disincentivizes making an effort, because
like investment and
right, because you have the ultimate say. And as long as they sign up for the draft, which everyone's going to sign up for the draft, everyone wants to play in the MLB, you have the ultimate say to say, that's my person, that's my person. You
don't have to court them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what David Ortiz's like criticism is that it takes away the incentive for these teams to get involved and get you into a state-of-the-art facility and work with you and show you the right way to do things. And instead you're left to maybe predatory coaches and agents into the Dominican Republic to like kind of do that on their own and get you when you're young and they think they see something in you and then they screw you in the end. So I don't know what could possibly change between now and July that that they can feel like, oh yeah, we're good to go. We can get this going in 3 years. Like that seems like an absurd turnaround time, but that sounds like that's the turnaround time we're going to have. So they really just kicked the can down the road on this thing because they wanted it agreed to when the CBA was signed and they couldn't get it done. So we'll talk about it in July, I guess. They'll hide it behind trade deadline talk and get it done in the shadows, I guess. All right, so that's all the lockout stuff. Like we just said, it'll take some time for us to kind of get some distance and really start to feel the effects of all this stuff. There are some rule changes. It gives the leagues some more ability to make rule changes. So we're going to likely see pitch clocks, robot umps, larger bases in the coming years, but that's smaller stuff that is probably inevitable regardless. So we aren't going to really talk about it here unless Eli wants
real quick.
to.
No, I just genuinely do not understand why they want wider bases. Like, do either of you have context on that?
I think it's, at first base, I get it. It probably lessens injury risk because the runner can be farther away from first baseman.
They're not lunging for it.
Basically. And then, And then I would imagine.
Or like tripping on their foot.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing is that it would make the bases slightly closer together, I guess. And that could increase scoring by some minuscule
no
percentage.
way. No way.
More steals. I mean,
More
how many
steals.
how many bang like steals are there?
How would they do it? How would they have bigger bases
You
but
know,
not
you
make them
guys-
closer?
The people listening to this can't see both Jesse and Tyler. Their arms are fully extended. They're just reaching and reaching for some kind of reasoning.
I mean, why?
I understand the injuries at first base, but like I do not.
But think about how many plays are bang bang like that close, especially at first base.
Right.
I mean, I guess first base you could still make that as far from home plate, but like, there's I don't know. That
Okay.
I'm sure they
All
ran the numbers somehow. I think they're going to test all this stuff at lower levels in the minors, so we'll get some data there.
Okay, did you guys hear about the new Atlantic League rules?
I did not.
Okay, so for those who don't know, the Atlantic League is an independent league that MLB has like an ownership stake in, and part of their agreement in funding the Atlantic League is that they get to just like throw rules in, and the Atlantic League has to follow them. And so there's a new rule that on a dropped pitch, the runner can take off for first base, and if they get there, it is considered a hit.
Like the batter can.
Yeah.
So if there's like
if
there's no
not
count and it's like a wild pitch, they could just run to first.
Exactly. This is not a drop third strike rule. This is like regardless of what count it is, if you throw one to the backstop, the runner can just take off. And
it is kind of fascinating because I mean, how many times do you see just like these horrendous pitches and it's just a ball? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, no. But what that is like that's so like, I don't know. That puts such a damper on trying to get like the most action on your curveball that you possibly can. What it does is it makes pitchers more conscious of staying near the zone, and it incentivizes hitting. You know, that's like what the real effects of it are. And so you're trying to like, I don't know, you're trying to get Tyler Glasnow to not throw a curveball that drops 12 feet and throw that on the first pitch.
Yeah.
And like, I hate that. I'm a pitcher, so I'm clearly biased, but I despise that idea.
Yeah, because that's changing the game. Like the game, you know, I'm all for evolving the game. Things change, technology changes, but that's like, I don't know. That's a whole nother level of a way to get on base that does not currently exist.
Right.
That they're adding.
And they're considering it a hit.
Yeah. I don't think I like that, but like, I mean, I think what's the Atlantic team near Baltimore? The closest one is, I guess, the York Revolution. I think that's an Atlantic League team. I've played on that field. No big deal.
Me too.
When I was 12 or 11.
When I was 12 or 11, I played for a team called the York Revolution. I don't think there was any affiliation whatsoever, but I thought it was worth mentioning.
That's awesome. That's very cool. I played on the Orioles when I was in Little League. So.
Maryland Orioles?
No, just like at my elementary school.
Right.
But yeah, that's cool. I mean, we'll keep an eye on it. It's always, I'm cool for like experimenting, but I don't know if I love that idea. We'll keep an eye on that stuff. Let's kind of rip through some Orioles specific stuff to wrap us up here, because free agency is now open and the Orioles are active, baby.
We're going hard in the paint.
First, they made the deal with Jordan Lyles, which they agreed to months ago. They made that official. I think we've talked about this already, so I don't think we really need to talk about it more. Eli called this one. I think he was set on Jordan Lyles. I think it's fine.
If there's anything worth reiterating about this signing, it was that I called it.
Yeah.
Right.
We weren't right about
the only thing we're saying again.
Weren't right about Martin Perez. He's with the Rangers, but
yeah, that's unfortunate. But
1 for 2 is pretty good.
Yeah,
I was kind of wondering, did you call Martin Perez or did I say Martin Perez?
No, I definitely said it. Okay. I'm not letting. I mean,
okay,
well, actually,
fine.
No,
you can have it. You know,
I just thought I'm batting 1,000. Jesse's batting 0. That's what it is.
As we were texting, I saw you say that, Tyler, but I was kind of wondering, like, didn't I say that? But
okay. Maybe you agreed. You agreed like that was. Maybe. I think we all agreed like that does make a lot of sense, but it was not to be.
Someone can go listen to the episode and email us what we said, you know. So
no one's gonna do that. Please don't do that.
I don't want somebody to do that. I don't. That's not worth it.
The other major league deal the Orioles have announced is they've signed catcher Robinson Chirinos to a 1-year, $900,000 deal. as it stands, Chirinos is the only catcher on the Orioles 40-man roster. So, what do we think about Chirinos here? He's kind of more offensive minded. I think his defensive numbers aren't fantastic. Is he going to be the starting catcher on opening day for the Orioles in 2022? Jesse, you're saying yes?
I say yes.
Okay. Eli,
also yes. Yep.
I think yes as well. There is definitely a groundswell that Rutschman's going to be the guy, but I want Rutschman to be the guy, and I think we should be mad if he's not the guy. But I think it's going to be Chirinos as well. And then on this outline here, we've got Jesse added a note about there's an incentive if Chirinos is traded. So do we think that's ultimately his fate, is he is dealt by the deadline, Jesse?
It's a good question. I mean, I think, like, of course, we don't have any other catchers on the 40-man roster right now. So, I mean, we're kind of in a, I don't know, a desperate situation with catchers. So even if he is not starting halfway point through the season, there is a nice spot for him to be our backup right now. Right. So I don't know if it's his fate, but I definitely think that the Orioles are hoping that he plays really well and kind of above expectations. And then, yeah, they trade him for, a minor prospect or something. Yeah, I can see that being the case.
Yeah. Eli, you got a different read on the situation?
Yeah, I actually do. I think he sticks with us. I think that Chirinos is far enough along in his career that he's, resigned to a part-time / backup role. I think that there will still be opportunities to maybe, like, I was going to say get him at bats at DH. I'm kind of going back on that in my head. I mean, like, he's always been a bit of an offensive-minded guy. But
for
a
catcher, yeah.
Yeah, for a catcher. I take it back, though. I already said I'm going back on it. Jesse's making a face, and I don't want to hear it.
I mean, he hit 227 last year. That's
okay.
Well, that's a weird thing for
you don't
DH.
have to, Jesse. No, you don't have to say this. I already. Okay, let me finish.
Yeah, Eli, you go. But I think I agree with Eli.
Okay, I don't know. The possibility is there. I'm not necessarily thinking it's going to happen, but he's a veteran guy. I think the Orioles will want to keep him around. It's $900,000. It's basically the league minimum at this point. I don't think there's really, like, any kind of incentive to get rid of him. And quite frankly, if you are relying on Jacob Nottingham or Anthony Bemboom, Adley, definitely, we do not want him to catch 130 games in his first season. And I do not think that either of Nottingham or Bemboom are really the kind of guys that you want to go to once every 3 games. I think Adley is going to have time at DH. I think Adley might even see some first base time. And I think you want something more stable than minor league signings as your backup role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you guys. I mean, the Orioles had Pedro Severino a season ago, and if you were going to flip a guy who, look, the Orioles knew they were going to cut Pedro Severino after last year. Like, it was just obvious. So if you were going to flip a catcher at the deadline, I think he's a guy you could have gotten a more interesting prospect for than Robinson Chirinos, who's older, was on the market. Anybody could have gotten him. Like, if they were going to do that, they would have done it. I think the Orioles do value some, like, stability at the catcher position. You always need 2 catchers, and Chirinos, he was talking to the media this week. I think he said, like, the Orioles didn't mention anything to him about, like, being the sort of veteran presence for Adley Rutschman, but he understands that's the role. Like, you're gonna kind of help this guy learn the ropes a little bit, or just kind of ease him into things and give him some tips on the major league game. Rutschman's going to be up at some point this year, and I would rather have a veteran there to back him up than a career minor leaguer. I agree with you guys. So I don't think he's getting traded either, because the prospect you get for him is going to be so minuscule that doesn't even register.
Right. And Adley is the priority, right? Like, the Orioles should be doing everything to make things as good for Adley as possible, kind of.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing that is kind of interesting is, I mean, I think it's in the Orioles' heads to some extent because they included that in the contract, right? So I feel like that, or if Chirinos' agent or, negotiated for that or whatever, they at least felt like there must be some possibility of this happening. Right. So even
Freddie Galvis did it last year. He had the incentive in his contract.
Exactly.
It was like so obvious.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
Other thing that Michael Elias met with the media this week. Couple interesting notes. The first one that caught everybody's attention is that he does not expect the Orioles to be discussing multi-year free agent deals. Orioles Twitter has been all about Carlos Correa, myself included, the Warehouse Pod included on Twitter. This definitely throws some cold water on those expectations, but how real were they ever? I don't know. I know we've talked about this on the podcast before. I think we've talked ourselves, or at least I've talked myself into it making a lot of sense to do, but not necessarily that I expected the Orioles to do it. And there has been a rumor this offseason that none of the big media personalities are talking about, but it's this random guy that Raul Ramos,
right.
has been talking. He says the Orioles have offered Carlos Correa a $325 million contract. And apparently nobody else has offered more than that. But it sounds like Correa doesn't want to take it. I don't know if that's real or not. I don't know. Eli, make sense of this.
There are two possibilities. There's nothing in between. The realistic one is that this was never going to happen. There's absolutely no chance. And as much sense as it would make to have somebody, through his age 29, 30, and 31 years, while Adley, Grayson, DL Hall are all 2 years into their career, as much sense as it would make, this was never going to happen. That's possibility one.
Mm-hmm.
Possibility two is that Mike Elias is
a liar.
No. He's devious and he's scheming. He has offered this $325 million deal. He's working behind the scenes to still make this happen, but he's simultaneously throwing water on the rumors to bring down Correa's market price.
Could be.
And
I
definitely think it's possibility one. I think there's no chance that's actually what's happening. But if you ask our Twitter personalities across the app what they think is happening, I'm sure none of them will admit that. I will not admit that on Twitter. I will only admit that on the podcast here.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing is I think a lot of Orioles fans in general are I don't know. I think we're tired of the framing that, well, the Orioles, they're rebuilding. They're not going to do this. It's obvious they're not going to do this. It's why? They are. I'm not saying they're ready to win this season, but they're going to be ready to win in 2023 or in 2024. They're not going to bring up Gunnar Henderson might be great. He's not going to be Carlos Correa great. I will just say that. He might be fine. Jordan Westbrook is going to be a good Major League Baseball player. He's not going to be Carlos Correa. Carlos Correa is right now exactly what Manny Machado was doing for the Orioles a couple seasons ago when we should have signed him to a 10-year contract. Well, now you get a slightly younger version. Correa is younger than Machado, and you can sign him now to a long-term contract. So I think the framing of it's ridiculous, the Orioles were never going to do it, while that may be true, they should do something like this. They should. But alas, maybe they're not. I don't know. Jesse, what do you think?
It's not going to happen.
Here's the thing, right? It would be a wild thing for the Orioles to do. I mean, with how cheap, let me just say cheap, Mike Elias has been every step of the way, right? In order for the Orioles to get Correa, they would have to probably massively overpay him, right? Pay him more than what he is, quote unquote, worth, according to the markets, right? They got to entice him to come to Baltimore, right? When, so they would have to overpay him. And I don't see Elias overpaying for a player.
But it's not Elias that's overpaying for the player. No,
I know it's not coming out of Elias's pocket, but Elias, he has been a budget cutter, to a T, right? So for him to just go crazy and go wild and spend a ton of money on one free agent, it sounds a little far-fetched. Let me put it that way. Yeah. Granted, the Orioles are in a different stage, of the process than they have been historically, right? When he was cutting, costs at every corner, right? The Orioles are at a different stage, but it still just doesn't. And eventually, I'm sure he will have a big signing, but I think that it's going to be, a big signing that, makes sense where, the market isn't as hot for a certain player and he's going to kind of swoop in and try to take advantage, right? So
I actually kind of disagree with that. I really think that, you look at, I don't know, following the Astros model, they go out and they're happy to go get Zach Greinke when he's making $30 million a year. They re-signed Verlander to the 3-year, like $90-some million deal. Right. I mean, the model is just to keep costs low while you're rebuilding, but I do not think, and I don't know, he said it in press conferences, whether you can believe that or not, I don't know. But, he has come out and said that the purse strings will be opened when the time is right. So I think, to the Angeloses, who are the ones who are going to be opening the purse strings, talking about when the time is right, in a season in which hopefully we win 60 games, that might not feel like the right time. That said, we can plan ahead. This kind of shortstop will not be on the market next year, will not be on the market the year after. And so I think you need to go for it.
Unless he takes a 1-year deal, which that's been the rumor now, is that Scott Boras wants him to take a 1-year deal. And then because Boras has to share his contract with Correa's former agency because he just hired Boras this offseason. So if he signs a 1-year deal, then next year he can sign the big deal, which I don't know. I'm not taking that risk if I'm Carlos Correa. I'm getting my $300 million now.
Yeah. So the only thing that I want to say about that, there is a lot of effort put into making Scott Boras look like a really terrible person and look like a really just like only worried about his money and only worried about XYZ. If you go like listen to the man give interviews, he is so like unendingly focused on the well-being and what is best for his players. I mean, they have established at the Boras Corp, they've got, dietitians, they've got psychologists, they've got like every kind of like health and well-being coach that you could possibly ask for. And he invests so much time and effort into these players. No part of me thinks that Boras would do that for himself. If he thinks that Correa can get a better contract next year because, he thinks that he's going to perform this year, it'll be fine. There's less market competition, like in terms of shortstop players on the market, and there will be more teams looking for one, et cetera, et cetera. That is the only reason that Correa would take a 1-year deal, and Boras would want him to if it's best for Correa.
Right. I mean, it works both ways. Like the better Correa does, the better Boras does. And I mean,
for sure,
Boras would do better.
Boras has so much money.
Right.
Like Boras does not need the like 4% kickback from Correa's contract.
Well, and even if Boras, even if Correa signed a massive deal this year, that would be better for Boras, even if he has to share it, than him signing a 1-year deal and then blowing out his knee and never getting the big deal.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
But I mean, because the Boras thing came up with the CBA talks, because that was like the whole thing. Oh, the executive board's voting against it. All of them are Boras clients. That was like a whole thing. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, they're all the richest, some of the richest players, and Boras wants them to make as much money as possible. Like that can be good for the players and good for Boras. Yeah. So I mean, look, I don't know Scott Boras. I know he makes a lot of like boat analogies and stuff when he does interviews. He makes like a lot of analogies about, he compares like the league to a boat or a different like vehicle. I'll look it up. I'm not making this up.
Okay.
I've heard it. So, I'm sure he's a very smart guy, and I'm sure he's a little bit slimy because he's an agent and that's just how they are. But I get where you're coming from. He's not the ultimate villain. The owners are the villain. That's where I'll end it. The owners are the worst. They're billionaires. Scott Boras is a millionaire. He's not as bad, but he's still bad.
He might be getting pretty close to.
He's probably pretty close,
but it's because he's been fighting for the people who are not.
Right. Elias also told the media that it's possible the Orioles are going to add another starting pitcher type before the season gets started, and they have been tied to Danny Duffy. What do you think about that, Jesse, as a signing, Danny Duffy?
I mean, that'd be fine. That'd be good. Sure. I mean, we could, he's a veteran and he would pitch some innings for us. So sure.
Oh yeah, catch the fever, the hot stove fever. He can pitch some
yeah.
innings.
Yeah, right. He would be, yeah. Go ahead.
Danny Duffy's good. Like if I'm Danny Duffy, I don't know if I'm taking a 1-year deal though. Like I think I'm better than a 1-year deal if I'm Danny Duffy. Did he get hurt last year? Maybe then, but he's pretty good. I don't know. He only threw 60 innings last year, but he had a 2.51 ERA, struck out more than a batter an inning. Like, I don't know. He's good. Fun. He's fine.
and he did that for the Royals too, which there's a little curve with that you got to give,
I suppose so. I don't know. If I'm Danny Duffy, I don't know. I don't see the Orioles getting him. I'll just say that. I don't see the Orioles getting him.
The thing
too much out of our price range.
The thing that I'll throw out is I think that it's kind of interesting. We could end up with a rotation besides Jordan Lyles of all lefties on opening day. You got Means, and then it would be Lyles, and let's say Duffy, and then it's probably like Aiken and Zimmerman, or Lowther Zimmerman, or Wells Zimmerman. I'm assuming Zimmerman's in there, but we've got 4 lefties, and I would think that Dean Kramer is going to be still in AAA to start the year.
Yeah, I think the top 3
right for it.
The top 3 is probably Means, Lyles, Zimmerman. Man, that is not good.
It's not great, but Duffy would definitely help. He would make the team better, and I think in terms of, I don't know, looking at how we're going to use our bullpen this year, I think that 3 5-inning games out of 5, out of a 5-man rotation is a lot.
Yeah.
Relative to where we were last year when 3 innings was a hopeful out of the starting pitcher. I think if you can get 3 out of 5 pitchers that are definitely going to throw 5 innings, that's a very good thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of pitchers, they did talk about, Elias also talked about DL Hall, and he said that it's possible that Hall is going to make a big league impact, probably, quote unquote, probably very soon, is what Elias said. I mean, I said earlier, Hall could be a guy I could see maybe making an opening day roster, although with the injury stuff, probably not. But Eli, do you make anything of that, or is that just kind of blown smoke?
I'm not sure. I struggle with it. I like what you had said about if anybody would be impacted by the incentives for like the draft picks at Rookie of the Year, it is somebody right at DL levels Hall. DL Hall's level. Excuse me, DL Hall's level. I don't know. I would assume that in a service time game, you only have to wait like 3 weeks and change or something like that to get an extra year of control, like over a player. So I have a very hard time thinking that any top 100 prospect would be in that situation. That said, I think that, with DL Hall's injury concerns, with him being wild, at times, there's definitely a good chance that the Orioles would option him at some point throughout the season. And so I think that, they could potentially bank on that and say, well, he probably won't get a full year of service time anyway, because he got optioned and wasn't in the bigs for a third of the season or so. And they might play that game. I think we see DL Hall at the end of April, just like everyone anticipated, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's easy enough to say, like, he's got the injuries, we got to build him back up, all that stuff. Because I mean, people have talked about DL Hall has reliever risk anyway, even when he's healthy, because he's just a little bit wild, because his stuff is really good and it's hard to control and all that stuff. So I don't think DL Hall will be a opening day, but yeah, I could see like by May. I think that's possible. I would like to see him come up as a starter.
Me too.
But I don't know. I think when they bring him up initially, he'll come up as a starter. Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, like when Elias says these things, right, I think he's trying to kind of, I mean, when he communicates with the media, of course, his main objective, I think, is to appease the fans and make the fans happy. So, I mean, I definitely think we'll see Hall, clearly this year. But whether he's is on the opening day roster, I think it's a little more of a stretch. So especially given the situations with the limited options, right? The limited times they can option them in a year, like that would seem to me to make sense. Well, just let's bring them up a little later too. That's another incentive why they might do that.
Yeah. And he did talk about Rutschman. He said the new CBA is going to have no bearing on when Rutschman gets promoted. I think that's accurate because I don't think the CBA really changes the math. I would love to see him up on opening day, but right. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think we kind of touched on this, but if you guys have anything else to add, feel free.
No, I think that's the perfect way to say it. The CBA didn't change anything regarding service time manipulation, so it has no bearing on when he'll get promoted because they're going to promote him to manipulate his service time.
Right.
He wasn't getting promoted for opening day then, and he's not getting promoted for opening day now.
Right. And that sucks. And we should trash Mike Elias for that. I mean, that's you got to hold him accountable. This is ridiculous. If he doesn't get called up, he should be on opening day, and I'll reserve the right to judge him until then. But yeah, that's just where I stand. I think some people on Twitter are getting excited thinking he's going to be up, and I'm not there. And then the last note he had was on Grayson Rodriguez. This is a guy I don't think anybody expects to be up too early because he's still pretty young, 22 years old, pitched only at AA last year, is not quite up to AAA. However, big criticism of how they've handled Grayson Rodriguez, although it's worked out, is that he doesn't pitch very deep into games. He's pretty much like 5 innings and gone, sometimes earlier than that if he's thrown a lot of pitches. So what do you think about that, Eli, as part of the development? This is kind of go time for Grayson Rodriguez to kind of step things up and be big league ready. So what do you think about pitching deeper?
Yeah, I think that there's not really, I mean, he's been healthy. I think it's not a matter of concerns with health or anything like that. I think the Orioles are just trying to give him the most controlled environment that they can. They want to go out, have him do his thing for a little bit, get him game competition as often as they can, but at the same time at all costs. So Grayson Rodriguez, one of the things about him is he's got, this huge athletic body. So I don't think there are any concerns with longevity. I think that definitely continues to get up towards these higher levels. They are going to allow him to stretch out. They're going to allow him to throw 100 pitches more often. And I wouldn't be surprised out of the game, goes down into the tunnel and throws 30 more pitches. I don't think that there's ever really been concern about his ability to do so. I think that the Orioles, it's an inevitable part of his progression. As they have protected him through all this time, they've continued to let his body mature. His mechanics keep getting rounded out, and they're confident that he'll be able to stay healthy. They'll allow him to keep going and pitch deeper into games. Yeah,
I mean, he's been healthy so far in his career, which is great. He has ramped up innings every year. His first year doesn't really count. He threw 19.1 innings after he was drafted in 2018. Then in 2019, 94 innings. 2020, we missed because of the pandemic. Last year was up to 103. I think around 120 innings is like a reasonable goal for 2022. And some of those should be in the big leagues. They should. I mean, if everything stays on trajectory, Grayson Rodriguez should be up in Baltimore. I don't know, July, August, I think is reasonable. But then of course we then get into service time manipulation again, because you could just wait till May of next year. They don't have to put him on the 40-man until this offseason. I don't know. Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say about what Eli said is, I still do think the limitation of innings still had something to do with health concerns, even though he doesn't have a history of injuries, right? He is still a guy that is throwing really, really hard, and he's a really young guy. Now, granted, in a lot of situations, I'm sure he was told, hold back or, don't throw, everything you have, right? Like you don't need to throw 100 this game or whatever, like I'm sure. Yeah. Like he was restrained a bit.
Yeah. I did say it was to protect him. And I definitely was not saying that health was not a factor. I mean, they're definitely doing it to like protect his arm, protect his body. But I'm saying that I don't think that health, like
is
beyond
the main
him
factor,
beyond him being an elite prospect, there aren't like health concerns about him in particular, I don't think. And at this point, he's 22, his body is mature, and I think that they're at the point where they will be ready to let him take those next steps and start to really let loose. That's all.
Yeah.
Cool. Only other stuff was a couple minor league moves. The Orioles have brought back Connor Green. Eli, are you hyped on Connor Green again?
I I had an up and down relationship with Connor Green last year. I was super high on him. When I see him at spring training throwing 97 with some late action, I will probably be up on him again. And then when I see it trailing off towards the backstop, I'll probably be down on him again. Yeah. So such is life.
This is the third time the Orioles have gotten him back in the last year and a half. November 2020, they signed him. In August of 2021, the Dodgers took him off waivers, and then 2 weeks later, the Orioles took him back off waivers. And now in March of 2022, he is back with the Orioles. So we'll see. I'm sure he will pitch out of the bullpen at some point this year. It might not be pretty, but I'm sure he'll be there. And then the other deal was utility man Chris Owings has signed with the Orioles on a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. Owings has played 9 years in the big leagues. Most of that's been with the Arizona Diamondbacks, where he was like a starter from like 2013 through 2018, and he's bounced around the league a little bit. Last year had a 165 OPS plus. Just don't look at the sample size. Pretty good.
A whopping 43 plate appearances.
Well, I said don't look at the sample size.
Well, I had already done it.
But Owings, I think, is interesting because he's a utility guy. I think he's got a shot to make the opening day roster. It's not super sexy, but I mean, am I wrong in thinking that though?
No, I'm with you. I definitely think he's got a shot. The thing that kind of intrigues me is I think that we have an assortment of veterans, and I'm just curious, like, how we continue to get Jahmai Jones, Jorge Mateo, Ramon Urias, and all of these guys reps, Rylan Bannon, it's time. Like,
yeah,
I just don't know. I'm not sure what the goal is. And so one of Owings or Odor or whoever are eventually going to need to go in order to keep like the revolving door of infielders that we had last year going. And I do think that's the intent, is to make sure we're getting all of them time. It's interesting.
Yeah, I was trying to look at where he's.
Oh, and Shed Long.
Oh crap!
Did we even mention Shed Long?
I thought we mentioned him on an episode a while ago or did we not?
Oh, it was a minor league. Okay, well, in case we didn't, the Orioles signed Shed Long. Yeah. Formerly traded for Sonny Gray. He was a top prospect. He broke in with the Mariners and did a solid job. I don't know. The Mariners are turning into a winning team at this point, and it was time to cut bait.
Yeah. Jesse,
Shed Long is in the mix too.
Yeah, that's true. Jesse, did you want to talk about Chris Owings or sort of the infield situation at all?
I mean, yeah, I guess my feeling on it is, we can have Odor or we can have Owings on the team. I don't want both of them to be on the team because I much would rather want to see, all these other guys that we're talking about, Mateo, Urias, and in particular. So and Jahmai Jones, right? Like, so I want them to be the priority, and I don't want their time to be cut. Like if we need Owings or we need Odor to play because, we want to give guys rest or whatever, or guys are hurt, that's fine. But I don't want them to cut into their opportunities. And That's why I think it would make sense just to have one of them, Owings or Odor, on the team and not both of them, you know.
What I will say is that I don't think they've set in stone how many players are going to be on the roster for April. I think they're toying with upping that to like 28 players for April. So maybe that's where an Owings comes in, where because he can play outfield. He played outfield last year, a bunch of games. He started to kind of shift not away from the infield, but he's playing more in the outfield recently. So I wonder if that factors into like they want a utility guy that can kind of do anything. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying. Cause the Odor signing paired with this, or it's just to have a guy at Norfolk for a couple months that you can call up if you need a guy. I mean, it doesn't have to be on the big league roster. It's a minor league deal.
Right. Yeah.
So probably not a big deal, but still interesting, something to watch, and could be a competition in the spring for the 3 weeks that it's here. So I think that's everything. We covered a lot. We had a longer episode today. But I think it was good. Next week, basically in the last couple of weeks before the season starts, I think we're going to try to talk minor leagues a little bit, and we're going to try to do like a more thorough season preview. It's kind of going to be a jam-packed spring training here, but that's, I think, sort of the loose plan for the rest of March. But I think it was good, guys. Anything else to add before we skedaddle? I just said skedaddle.
You said skedaddle,
and I don't like that.
I don't know. It's a new flavor for the pod. And so, on that note, I will also skedaddle.
All right. Well, before you skedaddle, Eli, you should go over to Twitter and give us a follow on at the Warehouse Pod. You should also go to your various podcast apps and subscribe to the podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. If you can give us a rating of the highest possible level, that would be awesome. It helps us reach other people. You can also go over to substack.com, thewarehousepod.substack.com. And if you sign up there, our podcasts will get emailed to you. So you can kind of bypass the whole podcast app if you're not into that, because some people aren't. And you should also go over to our YouTube page where all the episodes are over there as well. We need to get a bunch more followers or a bunch more subscribers before we can get like a unique URL. So for right now, it's a bunch of letters, but just go search for the Warehouse Podcast on YouTube and we'll pop up.
Beautiful.
So I think that is it. Thank you. Oh, do you guys want to promote anything independently? Anything you're doing? your social medias? No? Okay.
At the Warehouse Pod. But we have gradually gotten further and further away from that. And I think it's I don't know. We're not very interesting off of this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, that's where a lot of it is. Just go to the Warehouse Pod and that's where we tweet stuff. So check that out. And also go to camdenchat.com where I write blogs. All right, boys. Well, until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
Thank you for listening.